All right, let's dive into a really pivotal and pretty violent moment in Tudor history. We're talking about a rebellion that came dangerously close to toppling a queen just months after she got the crown. And it all boils down to one explosive question. Was this about politics or was it about piety?
So, I want you to picture this. It's the winter of 1554. Queen Mary I is brand new to the throne, but instead of a peaceful start to her reign, she's staring down an army of her own subjects marching right for London. Now, this wasn't some small-time riot. This was a real, organized military force. So the question is, what on earth could drive English subjects to commit treason against their own monarch?
To really get to the bottom of this rebellion, we first have to understand the crisis Mary inherited. See, England in 1553 was basically a tinderbox, just waiting for a spark. And the Queen's next move, well, it was about to provide a massive one.
I mean, just look at this timeline. It really captures the sheer religious chaos of the time. The historian Eamon Duffy puts it really well. The average person was dealing with decades of spiritual whiplash. 1 minute, you're Catholic. Then suddenly, you're Protestant. And now a devoutly Catholic monarch is back in charge, and she is determined to turn back the clock. You can just imagine how divided and exhausted the whole nation must have felt.
But it wasn't just about religion. Historians have a name for this period, the Mid-Tudor Crisis, and for very good reason. The kingdom was basically facing a perfect storm of problems, a crisis hitting on every single front.
Yeah, this economic chaos was a huge piece of the puzzle. The historian David Loades explains that the government was pretty much bankrupt. To pay for all these expensive wars, the crown had been, well, messing with the money itself. They were literally reducing the amount of silver in the coins. And the result? The money in everybody's pockets was worth less and less, while the price of everything, food, goods, was just soaring.
And just look at the scale of this. The government made a massive profit, sure, but it was basically a hidden tax on its own people. This wasn't some abstract economic policy people were debating. No, this meant real, actual hardship, and it was fueling a lot of anger all across the country.
So, into this incredibly volatile mix of religious division and economic pain, Mary throws what is essentially a political hand grenade. She announces she's going to marry Prince Philip of Spain, the most powerful Catholic nation in all of Europe. And this decision right here became the flashpoint. It ignited all those simmering tensions into a full-blown rebellion.
This quote from David Loades it absolutely nails the heart of the fear. Back in the 16th century, a wife's property legally became her husband's when they married. So, the terrifying question on everyone's mind was, if our queen marries a foreign king, does England itself become the property of Spain? Are we going to be dragged into their wars, ruled by their advisors?
And this brings us right to the core of the whole historical debate. The rebels claimed they were just patriots, right? Saving England from being taken over by a foreign power. But were they? Or was this really about religion all along? A kind of last-ditch effort by Protestants to stop England from going back to being Catholic?
What's so fascinating is that the evidence points in two totally conflicting directions. I mean, on the one hand, the fear of Spain was absolutely genuine, and it was widespread. But then, on the other hand, you just can't ignore this critical fact. Every single leader of this rebellion was a committed Protestant. This ambiguity, that's what makes this whole event so compelling to study.
The rebels were really careful with their messaging. Their leader, Sir Thomas Wyatt, he never once stood up and said, "We're fighting for Protestantism." No way. He consistently framed the whole thing as a patriotic act to protect England's independence. It was a really clever strategy, actually, designed to get as much support as possible by playing on those very real fears of a Spanish takeover.
But if you look past all the public statements and really focus on who the rebels were and what was at stake for them, the religious motive becomes impossible to ignore. These guys stood to lose absolutely everything under a restored Catholic regime. For them, stopping the Spanish match wasn't just about politics, it was about the very survival of their faith and, this is crucial, placing the Protestant Elizabeth on the throne instead.
So, with the country on a knife edge, the rebels made their move, and it all led to an armed showdown right at the very gates of London.
Okay, so the rebellion actually started off really strong. Wyatt managed to get a surprisingly large force together down in Kent, and he even captured government artillery. But he made one fatal mistake. He completely underestimated Queen Mary. She didn't run, she didn't hide,
Instead, she marched right into the heart of London, gave the speech of her life, and rallied the city to her cause. By the time Wyatt's army finally got to the capital, the gates were barred and the walls were manned.
And this is where the military reality of the situation took over. Military historian Alexander Hodgkins has analyzed this, and Wyatt's army was, at its core, a local militia. Sure, they had numbers and some captured weapons, but they were amateurs, and they were going up against the Queen's professional forces, which included battle-hardened German mercenaries. These guys were better armed, better trained, and way more disciplined. In a straight-up fight, the rebels, they never really stood a chance.
So, the rebellion was crushed, but its failure had this massive, lasting impact, not just on Mary's reign, but on the entire future of England.
It's kind of ironic, isn't it? The revolt failed, but it actually helped achieve some of its unspoken goals. The whole ordeal terrified Mary, and it convinced her she needed to be ruthless in stamping out Protestantism, which led to those infamous burnings that earned her the name Bloody Mary. It nearly cost her sister Elizabeth her life, but it also sent a crystal-clear message that would echo down through English history. The people would not tolerate being ruled by a foreign power.
So, when you boil it all down, this wasn't some simple story of good guys versus bad guys. It was a really tragic clash of legitimate, deeply held fears. You had fear for the future of the nation's faith, fear of losing its independence, and fear of disobeying God's chosen monarch, all colliding at once.
And so, ultimately, we're left right back where we started, with this one big, lingering question. Was Wyatt a patriot or a heretic? Was he a defender of the realm, or was he a religious radical? You know, there's no easy answer. But how you choose to interpret his motives, that fundamentally shapes your entire view of this incredibly turbulent and bloody chapter of English history.